I have never told this to anyone. That night, I was awake at the window, the city below a scatter of tired lights. A blade of blue-green moved across the glass and into the room. It was not a reflection. It breathed. The light pulsed like a living thing, soft, deliberate. My chest tightened. Then a voice, not spoken aloud but threaded through my skull. You always work for money. What if money worked for you? My whole body hummed. I laughed, then shut my eyes. How could a being from elsewhere offer an answer to years of debt in 3 days? The question landed inside me, heavy and impossible. Tomorrow would bring an answer I could not yet name. I am 48. I have been an advisor to other people's lives while mine frayed at the edges. My name is Ricardo Navarro. I lived inside a rhythm that felt like punishment. Wake at 5, drink bitter coffee, shoulder the bag, squeeze into crowded buses that smelled of old rain and metal, arrive to an office where I sold futures to colleagues and clients with a voice that did not belong to me. My apartment was small, with the radiator coughing at night and dust sleeping along the top of a bookshelf. The mortgage letter sat on the kitchen table like a placard. 3 credit cards, all at their limits. 2 bills past due. The stack of envelopes made a small fortress of paper. Each sheet a little accusation. Each morning I rose with the ache of all that weight pressing into my ribs. I would look at the mirror and see a man who had become the geometry of worry, cheeks hollowing, hairline retreating like a tide. I'd trace the lines beside my eyes and feel the softness of giving up. At night, the apartment smelled faintly of the instant noodles I used to call dinner. The only sound that covered the silence was the clock that ticked like a judge. Helen left 2 years before. Her last words loop inside me. You only think of work and you never get results. The divorce took more than our marriage. It took a sort of innocence. I counted money like counting breaths, careful, rationed, exhausted. I kept receipts as if they were talismans. I kept my pride folded neatly in the back of a drawer. I remember the day my boss called me into the room that hummed with fluorescent light. He sat across the desk, the weight of corporate language already in his mouth. The word restructured felt like a final coin dropping away. He said the department needed cuts. I left the office with my hands empty and my head full of small catastrophes. The bank, the landlord, the cold floor of the apartment. Outside, the street tasted like autumn and exhaust. I walked the same route home and felt the city move past me as if I were a stage set that someone had left behind. I reached my building and climbed the stairs. In the living room, the air felt denser, as if the space had been waiting. I sat at the window. The city lights blurred. That is when a thin, sharp light crossed the sky, a slice of blue-green, impossible against the stars. My first thought was practical, a billboard reflection, a plain glint. My second thought was older, wonder. There is a quiet pressure people mistake for fatigue. It lives in the shoulders, the jaw, the breath. For years that pressure lived in me. I mistook it for responsibility. I mistook it for the only thing that would keep a roof above my head. The truth was softer and more dangerous. That pressure had become my identity. I measured my worth by the hours I could squeeze from a day. I had small habits that held me like stitches. I read the same news feed every morning, the same scrolling doom. I checked my accounts 3 times before sleep, as if a different count would produce a different result. I told myself impossible savings plans and then punished myself when they failed. These routines were not neutral. They were architecture for scarcity. I clenched my teeth against them. My body told the story better than my words. I slept in fits, waking at odd hours with my heart trying to outrun a ghost. My breath shortened climbing 2 flights of stairs. Once, on a subway, I felt my hands go numb and the world tilt. An ambulance passed, and I laughed like a stranger to steady myself. The physiologic language of fear had become familiar. Tight throat, shallow lungs, a stomach that learned to expect hunger. Then the light returned, and with it a thought that did not belong to my usual scripts. What if I stopped? Not for laziness, but as an experiment. What would happen if I stepped out of the habitual push and became quiet enough to hear something else? At noon, when the apartment smelled faintly of laundry and damp cardboard, a spiral had appeared on the wooden floor. It was not carved. It glowed faintly as if lit from underneath. 3 points dotted its outer loop. I placed my hand above it and felt a warmth that was not heat. It was recognition. I want to pause a moment here and say thank you to anyone listening this far. I am starting this channel and these stories because they reached me the way light reached my window, quick and honest. If you are moved, subscribe. Help me reach 1,000 small lights. Tell me your city in the comments. It matters. It helps me keep telling this. When Caleb, his name would come to me like a temperature, like a memory first spoke, it wasn't audible. The voice slipped into the pauses between my thoughts and made them sing. You work for money, it said. Stop. I remember the absurdity of the command. I laughed aloud, a short, startled sound that bounced off the walls. Stop working. The phrase landed like a coin on stone. I thought of the mortgage, of the bills, of the reality that had no patience for such poetic instruction. How could silence pay the heating? How could indolence cover a debt? Yet the idea held a different weight. It was not instruction for idleness. It was a recalibration. At its center was a reversal, not action first, reward later. Instead, state first, action flows. I sat on the floor spiral and felt my breath slow. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the sudden release of holding. The days before had taught me to mistrust anything that felt too easy. My life had rewarded struggle. I equated pain with progress. Here was a different logic. Thought creates feeling. Feeling creates a state. State shapes what follows. It sounded like nonsense and like revival all at once. That night I dreamt of a river. The water moved sideways, but everything that floated along it arrived at shore with ease. I woke with the memory of that fluidity in my chest. The word abundance felt less like a concept and more like a memory, as if I had once known its texture and had been misled into forgetting. I called Mark, my friend who had been a voice of reason in a small storm of my life. Mark's voice is precise and dry. He values ledgers and logic. I told him bits of the night and the glowing spiral and the command to stop. There was a long silence. You need a medical check, he said finally. Stress can do strange things. And Ricardo, be careful with stories like that. They can look like delusion. His skepticism was an anchor. It pulled me back to the known harbor where numbers were facts and feelings suspicious passengers. I respected him. I respected the ledger. But Mark's words did something else. They highlighted my isolation. If I told this to the wrong person, they'd send me to a clinic. If I kept it, it would rot inside like a secret. I placed the morning's small receipt from the bakery next to the spiral and watched it catch the glow. I told myself, out loud in the empty apartment, I am allowed to feel this. I am allowed to try. A neighbor came by that afternoon, Charles, who owed me a favor from an old consultation I had given in better times. He handed me an envelope. Inside were 12,000 reis. I remember the exact weight of the paper in my hands. It was the exact amount I needed for the mortgage. My knees wobbled and the room blurred at the edges. Coincidence, the voice of cautious logic said. Luck, said another. Even so, the money shimmered, and when I placed it on the spiral, a faint light threaded through the bills like veins. I watched it with a new kind of focus. Caleb's presence that day was quiet. He did not gloat. He simply observed. He said, doubt is natural. Resistance is expected. Ask instead where resistance began. I lay awake that night and thought of my father. He worked 2 jobs and told me that rest was earned. Maybe resistance was taught long before I knew fear. Maybe I had inherited an instruction that no longer fit. The next morning I practiced a small ritual that Caleb asked of me. Breathe 7 times, not rushed, counting each exhale like a blessing, and in each exhale say, thank you for what already is. The syllables felt foreign on my tongue, yet with each repetition the chest ache loosened. I attempted to hold the state of gratitude for an hour. The apartment smelled of coffee and lemon peel as I sat by the window and watched a city in a bus that usually took 40 minutes arrived in 20. A woman at the corner store handed me back my change with an extra bill, smiling apologetically as if it had been meant to be. Small things like breadcrumbs. Each time something shifted, I wrote it in a notebook. The act of recording made the world feel less like random static and more like a pattern emerging. I began to trace the edges of my old habits. The news feed still chewed at me, but I turned it off with a ritual, one small act that declared a boundary. I slept better. My mouth tasted less sour in the mornings. I started to stretch before leaving the apartment. The body, it turned out, remembers other possibilities if given the chance. There was a cost. The new state invited questions from people who loved me. Helen asked if I was seeing someone. Mark offered concern. My colleagues frowned when I took a day of absence. The social world resisted what my inner world was rearranging. This resistance was real, and it stung. And there was something else, an edge of fear that felt like potential. What if this worked? What then? I had to be honest. I had learned to make safety out of worry. Letting it go felt like walking without a net. I felt panic at the idea of trusting the invisible. But the spiral was there. The light returned. My life, in small measures, began to release its tightness. I would test more. I would keep listening. Tomorrow, Caleb promised, would bring the second lesson. It would require something I had never given up before. A different kind of cliff waited at the door, quieter and heavier than a layoff. It was the weight of choosing a new logic. I could feel it settle like a nearing storm. The room chilled the moment the light expanded. I had been sitting with the window cracked, trying to invent reasons why the last days had not been a fever. Then the air grew thin and bright, and something like breath moved through the curtains. The blue-green light condensed into a form that was not human, but not fully not. It hovered taller than I am, limbs long, the suggestion of shoulders, the curve of a head. Its body was a field of translucent color. Edges shimmered. When it turned, the air seemed to taste slightly of ozone, like after a summer storm. I tried to speak and my voice caught under my ribs. The figure did not open a mouth. Instead, the voice came inside me, not spoken by sound but threaded through thought. Ricardo. The name poured into me like water into a dry cup. You work for so little, it said. There was an odd tenderness to the observation. As panic rose, my hands found the window sill and gripped. Who are you? I managed to think. The being drifted closer, leaving soft trails of light that hung in the air and slowly faded. Its eyes were not eyes as I understand them. 2 points of intensified brightness marked where eyes would be, and in them I felt depth, like looking into a slow-moving river. Some call us Pleiadians, it said. Others say guardians. Names are maps, not the land. My teeth clicked as my jaw tightened. The temperature fell and my breath fogged. I watched the little clouds form each time I exhaled and felt suddenly like an animal learning to adapt to a new season. There was a geometry to the silence that followed. It was heavy and full of expectation. For a while, all I could do was breathe and listen to the sound of my own heart. You have been taught to reverse the order, the being said. You believe work makes money. Money makes safety. We observed that for millennia in your sector. There is another order, it continued, and the words came like stones placed carefully. Thought becomes feeling. Feeling becomes state. State shapes reality. The language was not lecture. It was an invitation to notice. As it spoke, the objects in the room shifted subtly. The lamp on the table floated 2 inches off the surface, then settled. A pen rolled toward the spiral on the floor. The phenomenon was small and undeniable. What is a state? I thought back. The being's light curved in patterns that felt like punctuation. The idea landed. A state is the body and mind aligned in a feeling calm, abundant, open. It is not wishful thinking. It is a platform. I remember laughing, then nervous, sharp. That will not pay my bills, I thought. The being did not answer with proof. It answered with a question that felt like a palm on my forehead. Are you ready to unlearn? Unlearn. The word made my teeth ache. So much of my identity had been constructed by laboring, by merit measured in hours. The thought of undoing it felt like dismantling my own scaffolding. Before I could answer, the room shifted again. A symbol glowed under my feet, more radiant than the spiral I had seen before. Its lines were precise, a spiral at the center with 3 points equidistant around it. It pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. Tomorrow, the being said, we will begin your realignment. 3 cycles. You must stop working as you know it, it said simply. Not stop creating. Stop the frantic labor born of scarcity. I can feel my voice inside me form a protest. I need my job. I need the next paycheck. Did the being move the money that arrived the other day? Was that theirs? I wanted to know. But the being's response was a mirror. When you cease resistance, small doors open. You had a choice. It said, we do not do for you what you will not allow to happen through your own alignment. The temperature dropped and my breath puffed at the edges of the words. For a moment, I felt like an animal at a threshold. Something vast expected me to step. The being extended something then not with hands, but with a gradient of brightness that formed into a token. A tiny crystal of blue-green light, no larger than the fingernail of my thumb. It hovered for a heartbeat and then rested in my palm as if gravity were yielding to meaning. Hold this, it said. When doubt comes, press and remember your permission to exist without earning it. I held the crystal. It thrummed like a small heartbeat. In that stupor of wonder, I tasted metal and sea. The room seemed to lean closer. I wanted to plead skepticism and also to curl into gratitude. I asked the last practical human question I could muster. If I stop working, what then? The being's light deepened. You will learn to allow, it said. Allowing is not waiting for miracles. It is aligning your inner frequency so that action flows from an open container, not from a hollowed-out need. There was a firmness to the words that felt like guidance rather than dogma. The being did not offer a script. It offered a posture. Become the thing you wish to receive. When it spoke, I felt my chest shift. Memory hazed through me scenes of a younger self sitting on a riverbank sketching plans that had nothing to do with profit. I had been close to a version of me that trusted the world differently. The memory felt like a muscle being remembered. Then, as if concluding a lesson by a teacher who knows the students fight, Caleb said, tomorrow you will practice breathing and gratitude. Sit in the center of the mark. Do nothing else. The small is the scaffold. Begin there. Before I could promise, the light thinned. It folded like a curtain closing. A faint smell of ozone remained, and the room hummed in the after sound of possibility. I was left with a palm full of cool crystal and the city pressing at the window. I lay awake the rest of the night, the crystal on my bedside table, its pulse soft against the wood. When dawn leaked through the curtains, it felt like an edict. The next 3 days would be an experiment. It felt like stepping off a familiar path onto a new one that might be kinder or not. I sat at the spiral at noon and began a practice that felt childlike and immense. Breathe 7 times, and in each exhale, say thank you as if the thing had already come. The first breaths were awkward. Gratitude felt like an act of will. The second set of breaths loosened something. My shoulders fell. My voice shook and then steadied. After an hour of this, I heard the bell at the building. Charles, my neighbor, left an envelope. I opened it with fingers that felt distant. I unfolded the paper and saw the exact number I needed. My mouth filled with something that might be relief or astonishment. The money had been in motion before I reached for it. The chain of small events had begun to weave. Caleb did not appear to cause any of those things. He did not claim credit. His presence seemed to be a lever placed at a fulcrum only I could lift. The realignment was less about external magic and more about a shift in attention. That evening, I called Mark. He said the predictable things, urging caution, insurance, clinical checks. His love was metallic with care. He loved me by metrics. I loved him for that. But I also understood that some doors open only when the inside changes. When I told him that I had been told to stop, He laughed softly and then asked if I was serious. I said I was. We argued gently, and then with the quiet of the spiral on the wooden floor said otherwise a faint burn into the varnish, 3 points arranged like a compass. My fingers hovered over it and felt a warmth that wasn't heat. It felt like recognition. The apartment was quiet in the way of rooms that had been waiting. Dust hung in the slant of sun. The radiator hissed. I traced the spiral with the pad of my thumb, and the pattern felt less like a mark and more like a map. Somewhere inside me a small, rusty hope wheezed awake. At noon, as if time itself had been scheduled, the air changed. The light thinned and condensed again, and Caleb unfolded into the room with the softness of fog moving over water. He did not step into the space, he softened it. The temperature dropped 3 degrees, and my breath fogged. Your first realignment begins now, he said inside my head, calm as a shoreline. He hovered above the bed, and the spiral under my feet pulsed a slow, deliberate beat. Stop working. The words crashed into me like a dropped plate. I laughed, the sound brittle. Stop working? I can't. I'm losing my job. I need my voice cut like a thread. This is the inversion that binds you. Caleb's light curved. Around him, the lamp lifted 2 inches and returned as if embarrassed. Thought creates feeling. Feeling creates state. State shapes reality. I wanted proof that wasn't theater. As if hearing the need for something practical, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I found myself answering with hands that didn't feel like mine. Ricardo, my boss said, voice a little softer than usual. We can postpone the layoffs for you. Take some days off. Come back Wednesday if you're ready. The line went silent, and I could hear the faint rush of my own blood. Caleb tilted toward me, and his brightness hummed like a tuning fork. Coincidence? He asked. I tasted metal in my mouth. I asked what I was already thinking. Did you move it? No, he replied. Light braided through his words. You moved it. For a fraction of a second you stopped resisting. That was enough. Tomorrow holds a test more honest than this one. I didn't sleep that night. The spiral glowed faintly beneath the moon. My jaw unclenched and then clenched again. The apartment listened. Mini cliffhanger. Tomorrow, he told me, I would be asked to sit and breathe until I either cracked open or something new slipped in. I went to bed with both possibilities humming behind my teeth. The second day began with a ritual that, on paper, looked embarrassingly simple. Sit in the center of the spiral. Breathe 7 times. On each exhale, say thank you as if the thing I wanted already existed. Caleb called it the frequency of abundance. I prepared like a man making a small, urgent offering. I closed the curtains against the city's glare. I felt the wood cool beneath my legs. The air smelled of old lemon and yesterday's coffee. I sat cross-legged on the floor, palms on my knees, and let my shoulders drop. Don't attempt to create, Caleb said. Acknowledge. Allow. The field already holds possibilities. Gratitude is a bridge. I counted slowly. 1 exhale, thank you. 2 exhale, thank you. My voice sounded thin at first, like a man testing a rope for a climb. By the 4th cycle, my chest unclenched and warmth pooled behind my sternum. I felt something shift in my sternum like a latch releasing. I began to imagine precise, ordinary scenes as if they were already true. A paid mortgage letter folded neatly on the table, my bank balance calm and indifferent in its sufficiency. A morning where I chose art over alarm clocks. I saw them like photographs, worn at the edges. I felt them as textures: paper, wood, ocean air rather than ideas. After an hour the bell rang. I stood slowly, as if the body itself had to relearn upright. At the door a man from my building, Carlos, held an envelope. He smelled of laundry and street rain. Ricardo, he said, shuffling the paper as if embarrassed. Remember that tip you gave me about that fund? It tripled. I told my wife I'd share a bit. This is for you. Inside were 12,000 reais. The number flashed in my head as if someone had turned on a neon sign. The sum matched the mortgage arrears down to the last digit. My hands trembled. Paper felt suddenly like proof. Caleb's light washed over the money, and for a breath the bills shimmered with that same blue-green hue. "Notice," he said, "not expect. Resistance breaks the mirror." I put the envelope on the spiral and felt the floor hum to it, like two tuning forks in harmony. I did not shout. I did not break down theatrically. I sat on the edge of the table and let my eyes water silently. I began to practice then. I am allowed to receive without earning. I am allowed to receive without earning. The sentence sat in my chest like a small, insistent drumbeat. That evening I walked the streets to keep my head from inventing catastrophes. The city smelled of frying oil and distant rain. A bus I usually waited 40 minutes for came early and quiet. A woman at a kiosk handed me an extra taco without charging and said, laughing, "On me today." Little doors clicked open like locks. I called Mark to share the oddness. He listened and, as always, measured my story with ledger clarity. "Financial oddities happen, Ricardo," he said. "Chance. Risk. You must be cautious." He wanted proof in bank statements and consultations. I understood his good faith and felt suddenly tender about it. At night Caleb's words came soft. "The small is the scaffold. Begin there. Tomorrow will go deeper. You will be asked to declare and then to release." Mini cliffhanger. He promised the next day's experiment would ask me to speak my future as if it were present and then to walk away from wanting it. I slept with the envelope under my pillow and strange gratitude in my mouth. Doubt arrived not as a drama, but as a persistent hum. I called Marcos, my accountant friend, because doubt needs witnesses. He answered the phone with the precise, flat cadence of someone who has always loved balance sheets more than mysteries. "What's this about an envelope from Carlos?" he asked after I told him the story. "And an alien? Ricardo, you need a checkup. Stress makes people confabulate." His words landed like cobbles. I felt small and ridiculous and, privately, furious that the world would prefer a diagnosis to a miracle. "I'm not delusional," I said, more forceful than I felt. "Something is changing." "Listen," Marcos said, softer now. "I'll come by tomorrow. But please let's at least see a doctor. For your peace." I hung up and the apartment seemed too loud. The radiator coughed. Outside, a delivery truck backed up with an ugly, grinding thump. The neighbor's radio played a telenovela theme. Inside, my chest kept the slow memory of the spiral's pulse. That evening, when I told Caleb I had called Marcos and that Marcos wanted me to see a doctor, Caleb was quiet for the first time since we'd met. His light dimmed into something like thought. "Doubt is a necessary grain in the transition," he said at last. "It keeps you honest. But do not let social scripts rewrite your inner law. Ask instead, where did this resistance begin? Was it yours?" He raised a filament of light, and the 12,000 rays on the table shivered. The bills glowed, not like an effect, but like a confirmation. "You are asking whether this belongs to us," Caleb said. "You did not call this. You allowed it. That difference matters." I thought then of my father, of the long hours and the sermon about earning rest. I thought of Helena's last words, clinical, with edges. I felt the old story settle like dust. Work equals worth. How do I know I'm not making this up to survive? I asked honest. The question felt like a hinge. "You know because your body answers when you tell the truth," Caleb replied simply. He did not scold. He offered a practice instead. Breathe 7 times, feel gratitude, then stand and do nothing for an hour. Notice. Record. So I did. I wrote down the small correspondences, the bus appearing, the woman with the taco, the envelope, and I recorded how my palms went cool and my jaw unclenched each time I practiced the gratitude. The notebook began to look less like a list and more like evidence. Loop I made into a murmur. I allow, I do not force. I allow, I do not force. The words stopped me from overreaching. Marcos arrived the next morning with concerned eyes and a referral form. I thanked him and tucked the paper into a drawer. I told him I would consider it. He left puzzled, but still loving in that precise way he loves by attempting to fix. That afternoon, Caleb's form brightened. "Tomorrow you will be asked to declare an absolute truth," he said. "Say it as if it is already done." Caleb wants the voice to be not rehearsal, but declaration, an electromagnetic certitude that moves the body before the mind can object. He asks me to create a pressure of knowing and then release it into the world without grasping. I take a breath that ferries past my lungs and try to hold the certainty in my sternum. My mouth shapes the word slow. "I am a channel of abundance," I say. My voice sounds like it belongs to someone sleeping. Money comes to me through many doors. My work is creation, not survival. I live in freedom. Each sentence lands in my chest like a pebble dropped into dark water. Ripples travel out. The light in the room thickens and then thins as if an invisible diaphragm breathes with me. Caleb doesn't applaud. He watches with those 2 points of light for eyes, like someone cataloging evidence. "Now," he says, "feel it fully. Then let it go." I feel it, an electric warmth behind the sternum that runs down my arms. My hands tingle as if the edges of reality are slightly numb. For the first time, I taste the shape of the life I have been rejecting. A kitchen with a jar of coins that doesn't worry. A morning where I choose a paintbrush over an alarm. A client who calls because they need me, not because I am desperate. The images are plain. They are domestic. They do not glitter. They sit like furniture in a room that finally fits. We spend 3 hours doing this. I declare, feel, then walk away. I go to the bakery, to the park, to a bus shelter where rain begins, and the smell of wet asphalt reminds me of my childhood walks home. I do ordinary tasks with an extraordinary intention. Do not clutch. At 5:17 p.m., my phone buzzes. The sound feels like a sonic key turning in a lock. First call is the property office. A clerk with a voice like office paper tells me there was a system error and my outstanding balance has been recalculated. It's half what I feared. I stand in the rain and the news is a small, impossible sun. The second call is from Manuel, an old client who I haven't heard from in years. He speaks fast, excited. "I remember the cash flow model you fixed for me. We're growing. Would you manage this expansion? I want you on board." His offer is more money than my current salary, and not because I'm pleading, but because he needs what I offer. The third call is the bank. A matured investment I had forgotten about cleared today, more than necessary, exact enough to close the loan. Each call is a micro miracle that in any other life I'd ration into disbelief. Standing under the bus stop, rain streaking down my jacket, the city noise compresses into a single note. My chest opens, like a door unlatching. I return home slow, carrying bread like an offering. Caleb waits, his light denser now, as if the room itself keeps his attention. "Coincidence?" he asks, not with mockery, but with that patient tilt of study. I put the loaf on the table and feel the edges of old habits loosen. "Creation," I say. The word trembles out of me. Tears spring to the eyes I recently thought had hardened. Caleb drifts closer. He makes no grand gesture. He doesn't need to. The air around his form vibrates with tiny motes of light. "You have done 2 things, he says. "You declared, and you released." The field responded. "Now you will be tested with what you must abandon." He tells me to go for a walk at dusk, and to practice not thinking of the outcomes at all. Not to tally, not to expect, not to hedge. Just breathe gratitude and walk. If you can hold the state without clinging, he says, the world will offer correspondence. The evening becomes a laboratory of presence. I count my steps like beads. My thoughts attempt to drift toward calculations, the bank, the loan, the job, but each time the old script begins, I press my tongue to the roof of my mouth and let gratitude be the sound instead. I repeat a new loop in quiet. I allow abundance without effort. I allow abundance without effort. The phrase lands in the body and settles into a rhythm. Later, Marcos calls predictable, precise. "We need to verify those numbers," he says. "This sounds like luck, Ricardo. Be careful." His caution is a cold hand on my shoulder. The old world pulls toward necessity and proof and caution. Caleb's light flares for a heartbeat and then softens. Doubt is a sieve, he says. It filters what you keep. I sleep with a tension that feels different, not a knot of worry, but a readiness. The day had broken something and left me with a noise of possibility in my ears. I had spoken my future aloud and then walked away. The test had already started small, exact, cumulative. Mini cliffhanger. I wake before dawn with the sense that the final proof will not arrive as money alone. It will ask for a greater surrender and offering of identity, not just debt. The doorbell will ring. I will decide whether to answer. The ring at 6:12 a.m. is wood against wood, and I feel the sound through the soles of my feet. I open the door to find a man in a uniform I do not recognize, calm, small, like an ordinary weather. He hands me a thin envelope and walks away before I can ask what service he has rendered. The envelope is light but exact. Inside is a letter from a publisher I sent a proposal to months ago as a half-hope. They want to expand the financial column I once drafted for them into a series. The advance is modest but significant. My chest swells with something like permission. Caleb is waiting inside when I close the door. Evidence rearranges attention, he says. But meaning is the skill. What did this move inside you? I sit at the table and feel the wood's grains bite the skin of my palms. It shifted my measure of worth, I say. Not the number, but the story I tell myself about what earns me value. I say it slowly. Saying names helps the thing become real. Caleb tilts. His voice is soft, almost a thought. You are learning to let the body know truth before the mind catalogs it. Now translate that knowing into language you can use every morning. He gives me guidelines, no rituals with candles or chants. Only clear, short declarations I can speak, so often my mouth will remember them before my fear wakes. Make them plain, he says. Make them true. Make them impossible to argue with. I write 3 lines, and then 3 more. They are not epigrams. They are small contracts between breath and world. I place my hands on my sternum and say them aloud, slow, feeling each syllable settle into the throat like a pebble. I am allowed to receive without earning. The phrase folds down my spine like a spine being straightened. I do not fix my worth on effort alone. My value is born with me. The words buzz like distant applause. I create from choice, not from fear. I repeat them until they sound ordinary. Ordinary is the doorway to believable. Caleb watches, and then speaks 3 words that become an instruction, not a proverb. Use the language. He asks that each time doubt surfaces, Marcos's caution, the bank's ledger, a friend's scorn, I should press my palms to my chest and recite one of these lines. The body will file the truth as it learns it, he says. Then the field will follow. I do this over the next week in pockets of the day. At the coffee shop when the barista spills my cup, at the tram when the brakes squeal, when a child runs past on the sidewalk laughing. The words become a rhythm that sits behind my speech like a metronome. People notice a difference. They say I look less shrunk. My shoulders uncurl as if someone has removed a stone. Small miracles continue to thread themselves through ordinary life. A neighbor asks for a quick advisory on a housing decision and pays me with a job lead. A distant cousin, hearing my voice on a short interview for the publisher, offers to introduce me to someone in tech, someone who needs the exact blend of financial skill and accessible language I have been practicing. A local friend texts a photo of a small cafe mural with the spiral symbol. They say the artist found it in a dream and wanted to share. But illumination is not only about external evidence. At night, alone, I notice a new economy inside my body. My sleep is less choppy. The mornings have a tenderness. My jaw unclenches in the afternoons. These are small medical facts of relief, and they matter. Caleb told me that the body is the final witness. If the body adopts the truth, the mind can eventually follow. One afternoon, I walk into an argument with Marcos. He is careful, his eyebrows a map of insistence. Be systematic, he says. Document everything. We must prove causation before you assume correlation. His voice is a tape measure snapping. I set my coffee down and I say to a prospective client on the phone, I will solve your cash flow problem in 90 days and teach your team the thinking behind it. I deliver on time and offer a short workshop. They pay me and then introduce me to an entrepreneur who wants a longer contract. Each outward conversation is now an act of alignment. It's not performed out of scarcity, but from the impulse to create usefulness. At night, alone with the little crystal Caleb left, I hold it between my fingers. It is cool and pulsing faintly. I repeat one loop I have made mine. I allow, I do not force. I allow, I do not force. The loop is not a slogan. It is a practice for action move when there is resonance, not when there is desperation. Mini cliffhanger. On a quiet evening 2 months later, the publisher calls with an offer that tests the new language in a new way, a series that would attach my name to a platform with reach. Accepting it could change everything, but it would demand a public face I had not planned to wear. Caleb's light fades in the doorway, and I have to decide what part of the old identity I am willing to leave behind. The publisher's offer is a room full of doors. They want a weekly column, an online series, and a small speaking tour. The figure at the other end of the line uses the word platform, like an architect. My first instinct is to inventory reasons to refuse. Exposure, time, the performance of confidence. The old self, the man who had learned to survive by shrinking slides forward with a list of conditions. But the new habit is stronger. I breathe, touch my sternum, and say the phrase that calms my body immediately. I am allowed to receive without earning. I whisper into the interior air. When I speak with Caleb that night, he is watching me from a corner of the study, light pooled like water. To accept is to rearrange your field, he says. To accept is not to sell your soul. Decide the terms from a place of choice. I spend 2 days writing rules for my acceptance guidelines that are not ethical abstractions, but practical boundaries. 2 days a week of writing only. No overnight travel that separates me from the morning practice. A clause that any speaking engagement must fund a community class for underserved entrepreneurs. These rules feel like frames that keep the work in the shape I want. I sign. The advance is sufficient to move the mortgage into a light I had not felt in years. The first column goes live and the response is immediate messages of gratitude. A woman from a small town saying she finally opened a bank account after applying one of the exercises. A man in a startup writing that our approach helped him avoid layoffs. The impact is small and immediate and sacred in its ordinariness. For the first time, I feel my skill used as a generous instrument, not as a tool of survival. In the months that follow, I find rhythm. I wake before dawn to a short practice, 3 breaths, the crystal at my palm, the inner loop said like a metronome. I allow, I do not force. Then I write. The writing has a different voice now, less performance, more translation. I translate complex financial structures into the language of household habits. People write back with small transformations. Someone who lost a job starts a micro business. Another reconnects with a sibling after a conversation about allowance and trust. These are not fantasies. They are repair. Marcos watches. He attends a talk I give and later says with a rare softness, "You have not abandoned the work. The work has been resold." The months polish me. My chest is less tight. Friends return. Carlos brings extra tamales on random Wednesdays. Manuel's company grows, and he offers me a seat on an advisory board. The mortgage gets smaller and then disappears like an old scar fading. Money becomes an effect of coherent alignment rather than a feverish chase. But Caleb's parting arrives as the air cools. It is the sort of departure that leaves a presence. He speaks less with sentences and more with the movement of light. One morning he stands at the window, the city casting lines in the glass. "My task is finished," he says. "You have learned to move from center. Now walk in the world. Teach if it calls you. Do not clutch the teacher's light as proof. Let the proof be the life you steward. I have 1,000 questions about other worlds, about the true nature of the field, about whether this will hold when I fail. He answers with a small gift, a crystal no larger than a bean. It fits into my palm like a promise. When you doubt, he says, hold it. Remember the rule. Declare, feel, release. The world will reply. But the reply is never the point. The point is the alignment. He steps back, and his outline loosens into the room like fog. I find myself in a silence that feels like a long exhale. The spiral on the floor remains, dimmer now, an imprint in the wood that catches the afternoon. I run my fingers over it and feel the grain smooth beneath. After Caleb leaves, I test myself in small ways. I refuse an invitation that would exhaust me. I say no to a contract that conflicts with the community class clause. People who expected me to be the same frightened, busy man scoff or stare. Some drift away. Others come closer. Life prunes itself. I keep the crystal on a shelf by the window. It pulses faintly at night like a remembered heartbeat. Once a week I hold it and speak an internal phrase that has become mine. A loop not borrowed but grown in the chest. I create from choice, not from fear. I say, and the body answers with a shudder of release. Two transformations stand out the way small constellations do when the sky clears. The first, a woman named Clara wrote me after a column about rethinking small business loans. She had been denied credit twice. I walked her through a framing exercise shift from fear of paperwork to clarity of need. She built a simple ledger, approached a community bank, and secured a microcredit that allowed her to open a bakery. A year later, she sent a photo of a small shop with a line down the block. She wrote, "Your words taught me how to ask." The bread in her window smelled like permission. The second, a former colleague who had always equated busyness with virtue joined one of my workshops grudgingly. He had chronic pain and little sleep. Through the breathing practices and the internal loops, he reported a slower heart rate and fewer flare-ups. He said, "Your process gave me time to be my own accountant of attention." He returned to his family with fewer rages and more dinners. These are the metrics that make sense to me now. Repaired relationships, steady sleep, pockets of joy. Financial numbers follow as a matter of course when the organism, the human, shifts its baseline. On an ordinary evening 2 years after the first blue light came through my window, I stand on the balcony of my house by the sea. The crystal sits on the sill, catching the last of the sun. The work continues: contracts, edits, occasional doubt. But doubt, when it arrives, is a weather system, not a governor. I think of the man I was, hardened, ledger-driven, certain that effort alone would purchase safety. I do not chastise him. I see him and I fold a letter of gratitude into my pocket for that version, the version that carried me to the edge. He needed to become the man who could ask to be taught. There is a final rhythm, I say now, a compact loop I teach in the workshops and keep myself. I allow, I do not force. I receive, I do not deserve. I create, I do not clutch. It is short. It fits into a breath. It is usable in a meeting, a midnight worry, a child's scraped knee. The power of it is not in the words, but in the muscle they build. Caleb's crystal is still warm sometimes, as if some light remembers me. I do not watch the skies for him. I watch the ordinary. The hum of the kettle, the laugh of a neighbor's child, the light on the ledger when a column posts. These are the lighthouses now. If you have listened this far, I thank you. I am not trying to recruit you to a belief. I am offering a witness. The inner life shapes the outer world in ways that were once invisible to me. If something in this story resonates, a line, a pause, the taste of possibility, consider this an invitation to try a small practice of your own. Speak a short truth aloud. Feel it in your chest. Then walk away and watch what the world does. Do it without demanding proof. Mini cliffhanger. On a rainy morning, a message arrives from a person I once mentored and then lost touch with years ago, a person who now carries news that hints at a possibility larger than my local life. a doorway to share the method on a scale I have not yet imagined. The crystal hums on the sill. I fold the letter slowly and breathe 3 times, steady, ready for the next of many kinds of work. I keep the little crystal where the sun. The change was a new set point inside my body. My organism stopped standing at the window waiting for permission. My organism learned to say yes. Every morning, I begin the same small ritual. It takes less than 2 minutes. I stand with my feet on wood, let my shoulders drop, and breathe in 4 counts. I hold the breath for a moment, as if closing a book. I exhale for 6. I repeat twice more. Then, with the crystal in the center of my palm, I say a line aloud in a voice that is private and deliberate. I let abundance meet me. I do not chase it. It is not a slogan. It is a posture. Saying it sets the throat to the tone the body recognizes as true. Sometimes I say another line as the situation calls short, precise. I make space. I receive without bargaining. Those are my loops now. They are not fire and forget promises. They are measurement tools. I feel the temperature of my chest after them. I notice heart rate, the way my jaw tends to tighten. The body is the witness. When the witness shifts, the field begins to rearrange. The world answers in small, human ways. A landlord emails to apologize for a double charge. A client I had mentored as a favor calls and offers a seat on a board I had once thought unreachable. A reader from a small town sends a photograph of a bakery window rows of bread, a sign that says open, and writes, "I started because your column taught me to ask." These are not thunderclaps. They are rivulets of evidence. They build a pond. Not everything became easy. Old patterns visit like weather. I still feel the tightness in my chest on the cusp of a talk. I still have to be deliberate about not slipping into the old posture, the ledger posture, the posture that calculates worth by hours spent. But now, when doubt arrives, the doubt meets the loop first. I place my palm to my sternum. I say, quietly, I let abundance meet me. I do not chase it. Sometimes the words are all the ritual needs. Sometimes the words are a hinge that opens deeper work. Either way, the hinge works precisely because it is small and repeatable. I began to write because the publisher asked. The offer was an invitation and a test. To accept was to take the private practice into very public rooms. I set terms. I wrote rules on a single sheet. 2 mornings a week for deep writing. Travel only if I could keep morning practice intact. Every paid talk must fund 1 community class. These rules were my boundary and my method. They kept the practice tender and the work useful. The first series went live and the responses arrived like postage, handwritten, honest, small. A woman in the inland city sent a message about a savings spreadsheet she used for the first time. A man in his 60s wrote that my essay helped him sit at a table with his estranged son and ask, simply, what they both wanted. These were not windfalls. They were repair. And then an invitation arrived that was different in scale. A person I had once mentored years ago reached out with an opportunity to translate the method beyond the column. A symposium, a small grant, a pilot to teach the practice to community entrepreneurs in 3 neighborhoods. The offer smelled of risk and expansion at once. It required a face I had not planned to wear, a visibility that made the old man in me squint. The crystal hummed in the sun as I read the message. I breathed. I touched my chest. I recited a loop. Then I wrote my terms and sent them back. I learned, at that moment, something crucial. To accept is not to dilute yourself. Acceptance is an act of translation. If you are asked to share what steadies you, you have the choice to translate in a way that maintains the practice or to offer something that becomes performance. There is power in refusing the posture of scarcity when you are asked for help. There is power in saying, I will come, but only if we fund a community class. When the world calls, answer on your terms. 2 stories have stayed with me because they crystallize the practical geometry of the work. The first is a friend who, like me, measured his worth by output. He was exhausted, bright, and borderline bitter. I taught him a version of the breath loop. 3 breaths, a phrase in the chest. I let the work be a channel, not a currency, then a 20-minute stretch of silence before emails. He tried it reluctantly. Weeks later, he told me his migraines had eased. He had time in his calendar to think. A client noticed the difference and offered him a retainer contract that allowed him to reduce hours and increase fees. He could not attribute the retainer to the breath alone. He did credit the way presence clarified his decisions. The loop did not make money appear out of nowhere. It changed the quality of his presence so that money could meet him in a different register. The second is a small business owner named Anna who read one of my columns about reframing risk. She was turned down by 2 banks for a microloan. We walked through a particular practice. Imagine the shop full, feel the rhythm of orders, then write a single clear sentence about why the loan mattered for the neighborhood, not for profit alone, but for the repair it would enable. She practiced this at home, each night, until the sentence sat in her chest like a settled stone. When she went back to the community bank, she presented the ledger and the sentence. The bank said yes. Months later, she sent a photograph of a painted sign, "We bake for home." It smelled like permission. These are not universal promises. They are examples of translation. The method is not magic. It is alignment practice plus action. The word ritual makes some people wince. Call it practice, conditioning, centering, whatever lands for you. It matters less what you name it than that you do it with the body as witness. In workshops, I teach how to make language pragmatic. There are 2 registers you must learn, the inward language and the outward language. Inward language steadies the body. Outward language moves value in the world. They cannot be mixed without cost. If you broadcast your inward loops as marketing copy, you dilute them. If you perform outward competence while your inward state is scarcity, you will exhaust yourself. So we practice both. A short inward loop I use with groups is, "I am a channel, I do not bargain." We say it 3 times with palms to chest. Then an outward phrase, "I will solve your cash flow problem in 90 days and teach your team." Crisp, practical, narrow. That's the translation. Inner steadying, outer measurable value. Both are needed. I did not keep Caleb's presence as a spectacle. He left a simple tool, the crystal, the spiral, the posture of allowing. He also left an instruction I say aloud when teaching. Do not clutch the teacher's light as proof. Let the proof be the life you steward. I repeat that line because people often want an external sign to confirm internal work. The sign is useful only until it becomes a prop. There is an ethical edge to this story that I do not want to dance around. I have seen people encounter practices like this as a shortcut, the belief that a handful of phrases will rearrange the world immediately and without consequence. That is not what I offer. The practice invites responsibility. It does not absolve you of labor where labor is required. It helps you pick better labor, labor that aligns with creation rather than survival anxiety. So when someone asks whether this method will fix a chronic illness or make a relationship tolerate abuse, my answer is straightforward: no. The practice is a tool of alignment, not a cure-all. Use it wisely. Combine it with care, therapy, good medical advice where needed. The body is the final witness. Keep it healthy. The house by the sea has become a living laboratory. I still have a desk stacked with columns and prompts. I still take calls. I still negotiate contracts. My mortgage is a memory now, which is not the same as being free of all worry. Freedom, I learned, is not an unending holiday. It is the ability to choose the terms by which you will show up. Once a week, at dusk, I lead a small community circle in the hall below. We sit with a candle, a kettle murmuring at the back, and a single stone on the floor. I teach the breath, the chest loops, and the outward sentence. People bring small, human evidence, a loan approved at a community bank, a repaired relationship, a calmer night. We are careful with claims. We are careful with language. We celebrate the ordinary as radical. If you have listened this far, here is a simple invitation you can try now. Stand. Put your palm on your sternum. Breathe in for 4 counts. Exhale for 6. Say, aloud or quietly, one sharp line. I make a clearing. I do not plead. Feel where that line lands in your chest. Wait and notice. Do it 30 times over a week and watch what changes in the margins. I will offer one last loop. If something in this resonates, a line, a pause, the idea that the body can be retrained, try a short practice. Speak a small truth aloud. Feel it land. Then walk away and watch what the world does. Do it without demanding proof. Do it with care. There is more, of course. The next door will ask me to teach on a stage in another language. It will ask me for a form of visibility I have not yet tried. I will meet it. I will set rules. That, for me, is the edge of the work, to expand without breaking the small daily steadiness that made expansion possible. If you want to be part of a quietly practical experiment, leave a comment with your city and country. Tell us one small thing you want to change. If enough people gather in one place, I will organize a local circle. No sales, only practice. Subscribe if you want to follow the project. If you want only to keep your practice private, that is fine too. There are lights watching, apparently some of them above, some of them in the quiet, people who decide to try an odd sentence and live by it. Perhaps an answer is coming from a place we do not yet have a name for. For now I steward the life before me. For now I hold the crystal, say the small loops, and step toward the next door with terms chosen from center. I let abundance meet me. I do not chase it. A door opens somewhere else. I am ready to turn the handle.